G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. With part 2 of my daughter's Chautaqua, taking up from where we finished part 1 as she was crossing the Nullarbor Plain. Having begun at Glen Innes, come down through Canberra to Melbourne, stayed for a while and was sick at Mount Gambier, where she was camped beside a model aeroplane club in a 60 km/h wind with driving rain, and she had a head cold, and she encountered a fellow called Big Kev, and Big Kev took her under his wing and became pretty much highly parental, coming back with a grocery care package when she'd asked if he could get the gas bottle filled when he was in town, adding in a $50 gift voucher, letting her camp in the spare room at his place so she wouldn't have to wait until 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning for the condensation to dry on the inside of the tent before packing it up when she set forth on the next leg of her journey after recovering from the head cold. And then when she was travelling between Walleroo and Port Augusta, she discovered some signs on the trees telling her that the universe loved her, and they were in fact put there by Big Kev as well. And not only, but also, Big Kev paid for a room in a budget motel for her when she got to Port Augusta after her long drive. So thanks for that, Big Kev, and also thank you for sending me the photos. Okay, so we take up part 2 when she crosses the Nullarbor Plain. She crossed the 98-mile straight successfully, and then went up to Coolgardie. And just as it did at Mount Gambier, the Good Samaritan effect kicked in again. These two blokes are apparently mechanics working for a gold mine. So out there at Coolgardie, they see Ellie arrive, having just crossed the Nullarbor, and after she's filled the tank, while she's inquiring as to the location of a caravan park where she might be able to hire a cabin for the night so she can get a shower and a kitchen, the gold miner's mechanic, who's a 61-year-old Kiwi, he decided to step in and be a bit helpful and parental, and he paid for the fuel, and he led her to the caravan park and paid for the cabin, and then he and his mate took Elizabeth on a guided tour of the Kalgoorlie goldfields, and she cooked them a home-cooked meal, and then the next day, for something to do, because Ellie had gone 5,000 kilometres from the mechanic here at Glen Innes, the gold miner's mechanics serviced her car for her, and they even got it through to her that you're supposed to use good quality oil rather than the really El Cheapo stuff that you can buy in crazy prices, which is something I never managed to get through. So anyway, after having the car serviced, she toddled on to Perth, stayed in Perth a couple of days with a friend made more or less entirely of internet, and then she toddled on northwards, and then, having sent a photo of what she called West Australia's standing stones, in contrast to the Australian Celtic standing slivers, which are to be found at Glen Innes, though they're officially called the Pinnacles, we got a picture of the sign on the road to the Principality of Hutt River, which is not actually part of Australia, and where they don't normally allow tourists to camp. However, 800 kilometres, so my handspan's about 1,200 kilometres from my mother's ex-boyfriend in Sydney to Mount Gambier. Probably 800 or 900 kilometres. Mount Gambier to Coolgardie, say 1,500 kilometres. Coolgardie to Hutt River, 1,000 kilometres. So clearly it's time for her to run into another Good Samaritan or guardian angel. but possibly because she's one of the more effervescent, eccentric, vibrant individuals that most people have seen for a while, years, decades perhaps. When she arrived on the Principality of Hutt River Province, she sent me a selfie of her with Prince Leonard himself, as well as his successor, his son, Prince Graham, as well as a picture of the border of Hutt River Province. So, in defiance of their usual custom, she was permitted to camp at Hutt River Province, apparently because she's just such a sparkling personality. And thanks again to Big Kev at Mount Gambier for sending me the photos, together with a really nice handwritten letter congratulating me for having Elizabeth as a daughter and for my YouTube channel, with a $100 gift card voucher for me to pay into Little Darling's bank account, which I duly accomplished yesterday. So that was in Monday's mail. And then yesterday, Friday, look what I found in my mailbox. For the cognoscienti, we have the Great Seal of the Independent Principality of Hutt River. We have a 98-cent postal frank by the Royal Hutt River Postal Service, which has not been cancelled by the Australian Postal Service. On the other side, we have a stamp commemorating the secession from the Commonwealth of Australia in 1970, and we have another stamp, 70 cents plus 30 cents, cancelled by the Hutt River Province Post Office, as is the postcard inside. And whereas that is definitely my daughter's handwriting, the P on that PO box looks rather kind of different, as does the G on the Glen Innes. So I think Prince Graham, the Sovereign of Hutt River Province, addressed this envelope to me. Dear Chris, it was a pleasure to meet Liz. She explained you are a big supporter. With my best wishes, Prince Graham, Sovereign. Countersigned, Prince Leonard. Best wishes to you. Postcard itself is of the abdication of His Royal Highness Prince Leonard and the enthronement of His Royal Highness Prince Graham, 11th of February 2017. Congratulating each other, it's titled. Photo by Lord Stephen G. P. Bakey, Earl of Tenkerness. And there we have the then 91-year-old Prince Leonard congratulating Prince Graham on becoming the Sovereign of the Independent Principality of Hutt River, which seceded from the Commonwealth of Australia in 1970, and as it says on their business card, we are still here. Okay, well, so as I'm officially acknowledged as being a big supporter of Hutt River Province, I suppose for those of you who don't know the story, I'd better give you the short talk version. I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall when my daughter was explaining to Prince Leonard what I made of his example. Here's how it goes. Once upon a time, back when his name was just Leonard, Leonard bought a wheat farm in Western Australia. Big wheat farm, had to borrow money to do it. Trouble is, there was a glut of wheat on the market at the time, and the Australian government was playing regulatory games. He was buying the property from a deceased estate or something, and therefore the previous year almost no wheat had been grown on the property. When he bought the land and signed his loan agreement and everything, he could grow enough wheat to service the loan and he could buy his farm and everything was going to be fine. However, the government brought in a wheat quota, which only enabled people to grow as much wheat as they grew the previous year, plus 5 or 10%, which meant that starting from a very, very low base, he was never going to be able to grow enough wheat to service his loan, so he was going to have to go broke. However, Prince Leonard was the sort of bloke who's read the Encyclopedia Britannica, and he knew that if a landholder was suddenly rendered unable to make a living in a lawful field of endeavour by some change to the regulations by the federal government or Commonwealth government in Canberra, then that landholder under the Australian Constitution, a clause of which was inherited from the British Constitution, was entitled to secede from the Commonwealth and become an independent principality. So that's what he did in 1970. And he worked up a pretty good tourism business by having busloads of people go a couple of 100 miles north of Perth to visit for the day and change their money for Hutt River Province dollars, buy some stamps, buy some envelopes, have a food in the restaurant, change their Hutt River Province dollars back into Australian dollars. He takes a cut each way at the gate. And he was making a bit of money and everything was fine. And the Whitlam government, because when he did this, I think it would have been the Gorton government or the McMahon government, the Whitlam government ignored him. And then when Mal Fraser came into power, he didn't like the idea of somebody calling himself an independent sovereign nation state inside Australia's coastline. So Fraser got the tax department to issue warrants for the arrest of Prince Leonard and his sons, the Crown Princes. Right, forgive the interruption, I've just been chasing sheep. So anyway, recapping. Mal Fraser told the tax department to pursue Prince Leonard of Hutt River Province and his kids. They filled out or issued warrants for their arrest. One of the Crown Princes went into town to buy a bag of sheep nuts or something, and he was arrested. He was arrested by the West Australian Police on a federal warrant for not submitting a tax return. And Prince Leonard got a bit upset about that. He got upset in a way that it meshes very well with the sort of personality who secedes from the Commonwealth. What he did was he sent telegrams to the Security Council of the United Nations and to the Australian government in Canberra, explaining that because his son had been kidnapped and was being held for ransom, therefore he had no option but to declare war on the sovereign state of Australia. The UN Security Council replied in a telegram saying good luck, and the Australian government in Canberra ignored him. So on the first day of the war, Prince Leonard went into his printing shop and he produced boxes of pamphlets all day. On the second day of the war, Prince Leonard climbed into his Lake Buccaneer amphibian general aviation registered aeroplane and he flew to Perth. And he cruised over the suburbs throwing out pamphlets explaining that because Australia had kidnapped his son, the Crown Prince, was holding him for ransom, therefore he declared war. And here he was, flying a leaflet road over their West Australian state capital, and the nearest Australian jet fighter was in Adelaide, 1,000 kilometres or so to the east. And look out, or he'd come back the next day with hand grenades and let go of his son immediately. And he flew home, and he landed, and on the third day, Prince Leonard rested. He did nothing. At the end of 3 days, Prince Leonard sent more telegrams to the UN Security Council and to the Australian government in Canberra, announcing that because he had declared war and had his declaration ratified, because he had conducted military operations against his adversary, to wit, flown an air raid over their capital city, because his adversary had not responded in any way, shape or form, then under the International Articles of War and the Geneva Conventions 1901, 357, 911 et al., to which Australia and the Hutt River Province are both signatories, technically he had won the war with Australia, and could the UN Security Council please repatriate his son, or organise for the repatriation of his son. Therefore, on the following Monday, the Crown Prince was released from the West Australian Police Station with a $2 fine for failing to submit a tax return for a period during which his income was estimated to have been $12 million. So 42 years ago, this little old man, back when he looked more like this, he became planet Earth's top-ranking solo combat warrior because he personally defeated a nation of 15 million people in 3 days. I read about it in the Reader's Digest article when I was in high school. And in 1979, when I worked for Sport Air Aviation at Bankstown Airport in Sydney as an aircraft detailer, I laid hands on the ex-Hutt River Province Air Force Lake Buccaneer, which defeated the Royal Australian Air Force and Australia. I worked on that aeroplane. I cleaned it. I'm very proud of that. And because I knew it could be done, in 2001, when I was having trouble with the Newstart policy programming unit in Canberra regarding the imposition of the GST and how they'd reclassified me as a single person with no children, I rang up my Newstart, my community support program case manager, and I offered the Howard government the prospect of solo combat guerrilla warfare, 14 days per year. 23 hours later, the Howard government surrendered. to my demands. Because Prince Leonard showed me that Australia could be defeated, I was able to push my point so that not only did I, but every other single person with between 10 and 50% care of a child get paid as a single person with children. I got back pay too, because Prince Leonard inspired me in just how pushy you could get before 9/11. So anyway, the little darling is now at Karrartha. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.